Jacksonville, a child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. On Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours.
Network.
It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
This is recorded. We use Audacity and open source recording software and proudly use it. We'll start off with Uncle Carl Rove. He's writing in, as usual, in the Wall Street Journal. The title of his article is "Shut Down, Reopen." Excuse me, then what? At the time that he wrote the article, we don't know how the government shutdown fight will end. We do now. It's shut down. Shut down at 12:01 last night. We only know that all the players will come out looking bad. So why are they doing the battle? The federal budget for fiscal 1990... Excuse me. Start over again. For fiscal 2019 is $4.070 trillion. DJ Trump wants $5 billion. That is $5 trillion for more than miles of wall along the border with Mexico. The Democrats don't want to spend a dime on the wall, but the Senate leader Schumer had accounted by offering 1.6 billion less 0.002 or not $2 trillion for border security. Trump wants the border because he promoted in his 2016 campaign and believes it makes America more secure. Democrats oppose it because Trump promised it and believe in its effectiveness, but Schumer once had a different opinion. He was amongst the 80 senators who voted in 2006 Secure Fence Act, which authorized the funding for 700 miles of wall along the border. About 650 miles have since been built in various forms. But that was 2006. That was during the reign of G.W. Bush. In fact, that would have actually started G.W. Bush's second term. So a different 3.4 billion less 0.8% of the budget has left the Democrats and Republicans, the President and the Congress. All are willing to shut down part of the government rather than compromise. No wonder Americans see the system as dysfunctional and spread the blame around, although more of it falls on the party holding the White House. USA Today Suffolk University poll published on Monday, and we'll get to that poll in a minute, found 43% would blame DJ Trump and the Republicans for any shutdown. 24% would blame the Democrats, and 30% of both parties equally. With Christmas coming, the House only having returned to work on Wednesday. It took it looks as if Congress will again pass a short-term continuing resolution, which will fake a knuckle crawl and keep the affected departments open until the 6th of February, or the 8th of February. By that point, the House will install a Democratic majority. It's hard to see how that improves the outcome for Trump's White House. Democrats will dig in their heels against most Trump administration initiatives, especially the pronouncements from the president's 2016 campaign. Needlessly, the shenanigans of reality TV shows that pass for our national government can't be the GOP's only concern. If Republicans were to regain the House majority anytime soon, to regain it, they must win a three-front war. The first front, one being getting the most attention, will be the Democrats' efforts to investigate the Trump administration. It'll start in the House with incoming Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler raising questions about obstruction of justice regarding DJ Trump's firing of Jim Comey. Incoming Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal requesting the president's tax returns, and on incoming Oversight Chair Elijah Cummings out of Baltimore examining the president's financial ties and other supported scandals in his administration. For Trump and his team, it will be hell. Congressional Republicans must responsibly defending the president while enticing Democrats into overplaying their hands. The Democrats hopefully are reading this too. Through these investigations will dominate news coverage. They must not be allowed to become the only focus of the GOP messaging on Capitol Hill. This is an interesting situation in controlling media. There has been more and more time spent, funds spent on controlling the media, not just spin. You have spin generally after elections. But now there's more controlling what the message is when it's out. But in a world that operates at random, it is very, very difficult for a political party or a group of people to manage events, particularly in the field of economics. The economy is globalized. What happens in one country or one set of emerging countries affect the whole. If China's GDP drops 0.5 tenths, it affects all countries that trade with China and countries that trade with China, which is the emerging markets of the world, and the frontline so-called industrial capitalist countries. And then you have the UK and its Brexit exit. They're dangling, I guess I should say, by the skin of its teeth. The Tory Prime Minister May is totally ineffective. And that situation is out there with the UK, one of the large trading partners for the U.S. And then, of course, you have commodity pricing, oversupply of oil, or what do you want to call it, and artificial pricing forced out of primarily Saudi Arabia and its OPEC allies. They have been pumping less. Now they are pumping more, and to stabilize the price of petroleum, because all of these countries have to also make money. Now gasoline is at record lows, but that also indicates what status the economy is in, period. And this is part of the problem that you see continuously, the psychology of the market being basically ripe with enthusiasm that is not based upon the actual market, but based upon what used to be labeled wishful thinking. Greenspan had a term for that. I was trying to think of it. Can't think of it right now. Irrational exuberance is what he called it. And that is what you have. The papers don't mention that, but you have a lot of that in the Trump economy. Let's look at the USA Today poll. This is a USA Suffolk poll from Paglanulis. Anyway, on the poll, Republicans look to economy and be worried about 220. This is the USA Today Suffolk poll, and results should strike fear in the hearts of Republicans looking ahead to 2020. One of the standard questions we try to ask in national polls is about the state of economy. At first glance, the numbers look pretty good. Nearly half, 48%, say we're still in an economic recovery, while 27% say we are in stagnation, 10% say a recession, and 6% a depression. Only 2 months ago, 58% of midterm voters said they were in an economic recovery. This month's response shows a 10% decline. The drop in optimism about the economy coincides with a precipitous decline of 2,000 points in the Dow Jones. The Dow has moved from 20,060 to 23,600. 600, not 60. Sorry about that. For the record, the Dow is still up 6,000 points since DJ Trump's election, but investors have notoriously short memories and are unforgiving. They spin and they forget the recent tax cut would be a reminder of the liability come the 15th of April. What have you done for me lately? That's the question. Their perception about the economy's recovery took a significant hit from voters age 50 to 64, while 68% of that demographic said that we are in an economic recovery back in October. Just 44% now feel the same opinion, a drop of 24 points in 8 weeks. That is significant. And what is the common characteristic of this age group? It is the age group people approaching retirement who can't afford the short-term financial loss like the one they had been experiencing recently. If the country falls into recession, some voters across all age groups would attribute it to DJ Trump and his policies. According to the poll, 42% will blame Trump. 12% will fault the regular business cycle. Well, some people that are have studied some economics talk about the business cycle. We've talked about it on This Week in Economics. That is our macroeconomics program on the Numbers Man, a label here at WBRN Radio. We partner with Cranston Analytics. 6% will blame foreign countries like China. But according to the Urban Institute, the retirement gap between European and black workers or African American workers really started to grow in the 401k era. Amongst those with retirement savings today, the average balance is for African American family $19,000 compared with $130,000 for Europeans. The reason we use Europeans here, it's more exact than the term so-called white, because that includes a lot of people that are not European, and it's a bit misleading. The racial demographic that stands to lose the most from the stock market collapse is European respondents, and Republican candidates have to win the European vote by far more than 20 points to offset the historic Democrat advantage among African American voters, 90% to 7% for the Republicans. Latino voters, 65% to 30% for the Republicans. According to the president exit polls, John McCain beat Barack Obama. That was in 2008 amongst European voters, 55% to 43%. A little over, that's about 12 points, despite getting beaten by a landslide in the popular and electoral vote. In 2012, Willard Romney beat President Obama by 20 points amongst Europeans, 59% to 39%. That's 20 points. Willard done even better than John McCain despite losing. And in 2016, DJ Trump beat Hillary Clinton 57 to 30. That's 20 points among European voters, and went on to win the Electoral College while losing the popular vote. In September of 2008, I was polling the McCain presidential race in Virginia, and took a look at the overnight during the field work. Obama was running almost even with John McCain, the late John McCain, amongst European voters. So I thought our poll had to be wrong, but there was a stock market collapse at the time. The poll and older European voters were vehemently punishing Republican President G.W. Bush by not supporting another Republican. They realized that they had lost a significant chunk of their personal retirement wealth in 1 week. Someone had to pay. Now, this is very, very interesting here. What happened overnight? That President Obama pulled even, and we were tracking this in 2008. That President Obama did pull even, and once he pulled even, he pulled ahead of Senator McCain and never looked back. Basically, Trump has to be thankful that the recent stock market correction didn't occur before the midterm election. And this is one of the big problems when you have people that are slated to retire. And that would be that group that is not yet 65 years of age, and not the early group. Now people over 65 or 66, a different demographic. The Republicans usually do well. That's why in states like Florida, they do well there. Today's voters are getting nervous, and a significant slice of the population is beginning to turn from thoughts of economic recovery to stagnation. Well, it's very interesting. We'll have more on that on Numbers Man. That will come later today or tonight. We're not sure about that. In Sunday program, we don't know at this point in time. We have just about finished the news conference. We have the news conference, an edited version from V.I. Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. That will go up live today. And on Monday, we'll have the Monday morning quarterback as we normally do on Monday. And on the 25th, we'll have the Happy Christmas show as we normally do. Historically, our late partner, Jerry Pippin, did that particular show. We'll see what we can put together this year. It'll be a little bit different. Now let's move to the posts. This is actually the Reuters. Sorry about that. The Syrian rebels say U.S. troops remain in key garrison near Iraq. Now, this is the Tafah garrison on the Iraqi-Jordanian border. They are still there. And this is from one of the leaders of one of those puppet groups. The garrison is located in a strategic area near Syria's Tanaf border crossing with Iraq at the crossroads of the main Baghdad-Damascus highway. That's where Tehran's main armed supplies route by land to Syria, and the Hezbollah in Lebanon. Russian and Syrian governments have repeatedly called on Washington to pull its troops from that base where it has declared a 55-kilometer radius the confliction zone, which has become a safe haven for about 50,000 civilians, mostly men, women, and children. The garrison was first set up when the Islamic State fighters controlled eastern Syria, bordering Iraq, and since the militants were driven out, the Tafa has assumed a role as part of the U.S. strategy to contain the Iraqi military buildup. Now, this is a very important article here. Over several months, U.S. Marines held major rare excursions in the base in what Western military officials said was a strong message to Russia and Iran that the U.S. and its supporters intend to stay. Well, they're intending to break camp at this point in time. Israel has in the last year hit several suspected Iranian-backed military caravans. That day is disappearing. So that is the status on the ground from Reuters. This would be normally on Numbers Man, but evidently DJ Trump has machinations about firing the chair of the Fed, Lawrence Powell. That's according to Bloomberg. He is unhappy with the chair of the Federal Reserve. The president talked privately about firing many times in the past 2 days, citing some leaker, probably DJ Trump himself, that they declined to speak at the White House on that. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates. There's an interesting situation there with the interest rate raised. Part of the problem is, and there's always looking at it dialectically, positive and negatives. There are, of course, negatives also. We get that from, and I think I have time to throw that in, from the economist Robert Reich out of Berkeley. The problem with the Fed's hiking rates is now that Trump has already stressed the paychecks of most Americans. The rate hike will make matters worse. Most Americans have jobs, but their pay has barely risen when adjusted for inflation. That is part of the problem. Added to that burden by undermining, this is DJ Trump, the Affordable Care Act, rolling back overtime pay, hobbling organized labor, reducing taxes on corporations and the wealthy, but not on most workers, allowing states to cut Medicaid, imposing tariffs that increase the prices on many goods. And all which suggest we are canoeing towards some type of crash we had in 2008. This is Dr. Reich here, here, and possibly as bad as 1929. Now he's talking about in 2008 we had a depression. In 1929 there was a Great Depression. The underlying problem is not that Americans have been living beyond their means. It's that their means haven't been keeping up with the growing economy. Most gains have gone to the top, and the majority of households have taken home a larger share of national income. They wouldn't need to go so deep into debt. Without wage growth, most American workers can't continue to buy. This is a sort of debt trap that preceded 2008 and 1929. By the first quarter of this year, household debt was at a record high of $13.2 trillion. The last time debt was nearly this high was just before the Depression, and similarly in 1931 and 1928, the ratio of personal debt to national economy almost doubled. 10 years after the start of the, he calls it the Great Recession, we call it the Depression. It was important to understand that the roots of the collapse wasn't a banking crisis. It was a growing imbalance between consumer spending and total output, brought on by stagnant wages and a widening inequality. The imbalance is back. Watch your wallets. That's from Robert Reich, the former Treasury Secretary under while Bill Clinton. Now let me move along here. Many parts of the government, this is from the Washington Post, will be shutting down for indefinite closure. Large parts shut down overnight as Trump torpedoed a bipartisan spending deal. Funding for numerous agencies, including the operation of POX, Homeland Security, law enforcement, tax collection, transportation, expired at midnight. Close to 400,000 federal workers expected to be home without pay until the deal is reached. The shutdown intensified a standoff between Trump and the Democrats. Trump was demanding $5.7 billion for his little wall. About 2 hours before the shutdown, Trump distributed a video on Twitter in which he blasted Democrats. We're going to have a shutdown, he said. There's nothing we can do about that because we need the Democrats to get us with just insanity. Old Charlie Schumer said the Democrats are open to talk with the White House, and Republicans would not agree to any measure that funded they would not of the wall. So this is the extent of the whole situation. It is shut down now. Multiple federal parks and monuments are slated to close, some as soon as this morning. The Securities and Exchange Commission posted a list of services it will soon suspend, including processing of business records. The Justice, Commerce, and Internal Revenue Service are preparing to send thousands of workers home without pay. And this doesn't help retention because, again, these recessions, these close downs have come, and these have gone, period. We don't have a deal. That's the appropriations chair, Richard Shelby. He's from Alabama, told reporters after he's been through this before. But hours of maneuvering, it was clear that the legislation would not command the support needed to pass. Period. And that is the state of what actually happens. And the Post says in an article here, Trump takes no ownership. That's just Trump president responsibility for a shutdown once it caved. Well, DJ Trump will not take responsibility. We'll just have to look to polling to see what happens there. And as the battle goes on, federal workers are caught in the middle. They tell the story of one federal worker that's a contract cleaner, I believe. Here, as New York State officials reached an agreement late Friday to pay National Park Service to keep the Statue of Liberty going. Friday morning, the Commerce Department, things weren't much clear. Wilbur Ross sent an email to the workers Friday morning declaring that the agency was still working to update its contingency plan. That's probably helped a lot there. And 800,000 of 2.1 million federal workers nationwide, more than a third would be affected in some way. Nearly half would be sent home without pay. Many of those left wondering about their paychecks are part of an estimated 3.7 million who are contract workers. This is the part we're getting to, including some of the big consulting firms, Deloitte, and approximately 2,000 custodians, security guards, etc., that work in these plants. And Lilia Johnson, she's 71 years old. She's a cleaner at the State Department for 20 years, sweeping and scrubbing floors at $21 an hour. And she says it's Christmas time, and she needs to get her check to pay her bills. And this is a brief history of the closures. They go back one-day closure in the 80s, a 3-day closure Columbus Day weekend in 1990 when George H.W. Bush was reluctant to agree to higher taxes after campaigning on no new taxes. In 1996, a dispute between Wild Bill Clinton and Congress kept non-essential services closed for 27 days. Remember that? The Republicans were blamed. And during the administration of Barack Obama, Congress kept the government closed for 16 days So this is onward and upward, as they say. Nothing new there. To some federal workers, the shutdown becomes a routine. Some departments are better prepared, and they name here, such as the former retired Yellowstone National Park superintendent. At the end of September, said officials at the park plan for what to do if federal funds lapse. Some have set contingency funds out there. Slowdowns tend to be very disorganized, as it's from Tommy Reardon. He is the president of the National Treasurer's Employees Union, which represents IRS workers. They will be shut down. Internal Revenue's contingency plans say approximately 70,000 workers could be furloughed during a shutdown in December. That number is approximately 88% of the IRS's workforce. It's high because tax filing season has not started. But thousands of IRS workers are currently being trained to provide advice about complicated new changes to the tax code, and that'll start in mid-January. And another thing that happens, just because the shutdown could be settled, it takes a week at least, sometimes more than a week, to get things going again. So in other words, you have to have plans to shut it down. It takes another week. So in other words, if you have a week shutdown, you're effectively having a 2-week plus shutdown. And Border Patrol agents will still be on patrol. Air traffic controls will still be working. So will firefighters, maybe. Many of these are seasonal workers living close to the poverty line. That is from Randall Irwin, national president of the National Federation of Federal Workers, employees, which represents 30,000 of those who are affected by the shutdown. The Smithsonian will be open. The National Zoo will remain open through the 1st of January. Postal Service is not affected here, so one does not have to worry about that. Military personnel who conduct NORAD track Santa, I suppose, are approximately 1,500 volunteers who answer phone calls about Santa's whereabouts. So you'll be able to find out about old St. Nick. Let me just check and see. I'm actually going to save this story here. Let me just check my time. Okay. I have time to do sports, so we'll go ahead now and do the sports. Blockbuster trade with the L.A. Dodgers and the Cincinnati Reds. It's saying that Yasiel Plea. I always have a little trouble with his last name. Matt Kemp and Alex Wood, a very good pitcher, and the catcher Carl Farmer to Cincy, along with some money. And they'll get Homer Bailey. He's a right-hander. And 2 prospects, Jeter Downs, never heard of him, and Josh Gray are heading to Los Angeles. So L.A. will get a pitcher, and they will cut down on their payroll. But of those 7 names aren't the only data points to take away from the trade. ESPN Stats and Information Research. Here are some key numbers to note. Perhaps the most important part of the trade is money. While the salaries of Mr. Pre and Wood have yet to be determined, their arbitration hearings will be in January. Kemp, Yasiel, and Alex Wood should be due roughly $42 million combined in salaries next season. On the debt side for the Dodgers, Homer Bailey will be owed $28 million if his contract gets bought out, but the luxury tax hits $17.5 million there, and with the $7 million from the Dodgers to the Reds, it comes a net savings of $17.5 million for LA. So with some things going on here with this trade, the Dodgers projective competitive balance tax of payroll is now somewhat in the neighborhood of $185 million. Won't go much into that, but some very fine players moving on here. Kemp is one of 4 active players with 200 plus home runs and 150 stolen bases. The other is Ryan Braun and Andrew McCutchen and Brandon Phillips. So those are some, and that is the big trade for the Dodgers. Let's do the NBA scores from last night. The Pistons were at the Hornets. Hornets 98 to 86 over the Pistons. The Cavaliers were at the Raptors. Raptors 126 to 110 for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pacers and Nets in Jersey. It was the Pacers 114 to 106. The Hawks and Knickerbockers in New York. It was the Hawks 114 to 107 for the Knicks. The Bucks and Celtics in the Garden. It was the Bucks 120 to 107 for the Celts. The Magic and Bulls in a Chicago 10-point game there. Bulls win at 90 to 80. The T-Wolves and Spurs in San Antonio. The Spurs stick the Spurs to the T-Wolves. Stuck, I should say. 124 to 98. The Jazz and Trailblazers in Portland. It was the Jazz 120 to 90 for the Trailblazers. The Grizzlies and Kings. It was the Kings 102 to 99 for the Grizzlies. And finally, the Pelicans were in Los Angeles. The Lakers 112 to 104. On to the National Hockey League. Senators and Devils in Detroit 5-2. Devils over the Senators. The Sabres and Capitals in DC 2-1 was the final there. Capitals. And finally, the Blackhawks and Avalanche. It was the Blackhawks 2-1. So we got through this little regiment we have here as we overlook the holidays. Check out our RSS feed. You can find us on our radio. It's become a very popular destination for people wanting to find information from WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. Also on Spotify, a lot of younger people over there. We've been satisfied with Spotify. YouTube. And we are coming with more visuals on YouTube. We've had, as we outfit 2 new servers, actually, Linux servers. We'll have an open source report this weekend also. So we're getting some things out here. And All About Sports, that's our newer program. We've only done, I believe, 1 production. But we need to talk about what's happening in winter baseball. And we looked at economics of sports. That is coming. We have V.I. Putin's marathon 3-hour news conference, 3 hours, almost 4 hours, in an edited version. That will be on BR on the World. That'll come later today. Excuse me. And we have some other programming. One of the programs we're quite proud of, was very popular, was our episode on homelessness. So we have some very good statistics there, looking at homelessness. We started off in Seattle, and we looked at the national report that was put out by the Trump administration as where the nation is in the fight with unnecessary adventure called homelessness. There's no reason in this country, a $16-17 trillion economy, to have homeless people on the streets. The problem is it's a delivery problem in terms of housing. What has happened in Seattle, you have down in Pioneer Square, that's the old part of downtown Seattle, actually tents there where people are living literally on the streets there in Seattle. We were looking at some of the news. A homeless camp in the Midwest city of Minneapolis has now closed, and the people, mostly Aboriginals and Native Americans, have moved to heated tents. They were actually in an area by a heavily trafficked street or highway, whatever it was, by an embankment, and there were over 300 people at one time housed in that close proximity. Now the last of the people have left. The gendarmes came and barricaded off so a few stragglers didn't return there. So they are in a heated tent where they can come as go as they normally wish to. And there are not as many restrictions there. Some of these people were addicted to various drugs, and they can come in addicted, but they can't, as they say, apply their crafts inside, supposedly. But nonetheless, that is a temporary solution. They're moving more to permanent solutions where they can actually build buildings. Now, with modular buildings that you have now, the Iranians have used them after earthquakes. As long as there is space, and this is the most important situation, they can put up modular housing, tiny housing, SORs, etc. It can be done. But what happened is these cities like Seattle went ahead with their development process, and they already had a homeless population, but they did not prepare. So now they're just to have literally overflow. And you go to places like Anchorage, Alaska, it is all over the place. You go down to Los Angeles, they're starting to deal with the problem there, but more facilities have to be built. Now, outside of Los Angeles, as you move out 15 to 20 miles, there is more space out there to develop these, but people have to have transportation. So there has to be some sort of planning that should have happened 20 years ago. That is our little editorial piece. And as usual, we bid you a happy holiday, a happy Christmas, a happy Kwanzaa. Incidentally, Kwanzaa, we all have special programming for it. It will begin on the 26th of December. We at least have one programming, and we go through the nights that are involved in Kwanzaa. We've just, I believe, completed. I have to ask H about it. Hanukkah, there were 8 days of Hanukkah. Should be done with it. Ramadan was early in the year, so we have all these holidays in here. We still have New Year's Eve. Incidentally, we will have a New Year's Eve program. Boston Red, for the Jared Pippin broadcast booth. Good day.